Very interesting. It was definitely kind of a quick read. I feel like with some cases they kind of drag on sometimes, and you have to really like stay focused to pick up the key information. I feel like this was pretty simple.
Yeah, this one actually, if it would have been any more pages, it would have dragged on a little bit, but
Yeah,
it's like a good amount.
yeah, I agree.
Um, with this one though, it was interesting because like I started getting like really frustrated because put myself in Turner's shoes and like all the different situations. I don't know. I guess I took more of Turner's side than anything. I don't know why, but um,
Yeah, I definitely did too.
started getting a little irritated with everything going on. It's like, dude, I don't want to keep reading because this is like I'm gonna start thinking about this at work and it's gonna happen to me.
No, I definitely because it kind of seems like it's because I didn't really see anything as Turner's fault. Um, my thing was like it kind of seemed like what's his name, Cardulo? I don't know how you pronounce it, but he kind of just seemed like he has like this short temper, and like he's got problems with people who like you kind of like he needs people to agree with him, um, and so it kind of put Turner in a tough spot because obviously he wants to stay on this guy's good side so that he can get the was it the COO position or
Yeah, this COO, and then I think the one above him was CEO, like above the
yeah.
because Cardullu was the president.
And so I think like with him, he wanted to stay on his good side, but he also kind of like wanted to, you don't want to just like let this guy kind of go crazy. Like you kind of have to call him out on stuff that, isn't good.
Yeah. So if this is too personal, don't answer. But have you had like a opportunity with a big career yet?
I mean, I've had like internship. I did the IT. I worked at IT business, but nothing really major.
And I'm sure it happens like with those internship opportunities too, because I've had those, and then I've had a couple careers,
Hmm.
and like that interviewing process is tough because once you get into a job and you look back as Turner did, and you see the actual situation that it is, and if it's an unfortunate situation such as Turner's, you sit and ask yourself, hey, how could I have prevented that and not got myself into this? And that's kind of what this case is kind of
Right.
helping us understand in the real world. But I mean, there's some things you can do, but it's so stinking tricky to figure that out because I got myself into a situation where there's great money and salary involved and huge opportunities where I had the chance to also like become a vice president within a couple of years and also learn like the 8 different departments within the company
Yeah.
and like be trained in each of them so then I have a feel for the whole company. So I was like, dang, this is awesome. And the sales rep, he's one of the vice presidents because there's like multiple vice presidents. He was the one of the major interview guys that brought me on that really wanted me. And he seemed way chill and all this stuff. And even for the first like month or two, he was way cool. But I heard a lot of like not a ton of negative things, but like more so negative than positive.
Yeah.
And so I should have taken that as like a
A warning.
stopper, yeah, a warning. But there's a lot of there was just so much goodness in that company. And over time, there's one other individual. It wasn't him, but it was another individual that started getting shady that I started finding out. And so, just as Turner did, he's like, shoot, man, I thought about resigning. I thought about this. Should I wait and do this interview? But I'm sure a lot of those good answers or the good preparations just come by experience. But I don't know. What would you do in that kind of situation? Because I'm not in that situation now, but I want to prevent that kind of situation for anyone that I were to interview to bring on to the company, you know?
It's definitely because it's tough. Like what you're saying, when you see an opportunity where you can make good money,
Uh,
it's definitely hard to turn that down. And I mean, you start kind of rationalizing, making rationalizations, saying like, "Oh well, I'll be, you know, it might not be that bad." And so I think I don't know. I mean, that's a tough situation, but I think in the long run, like if I think sometimes when you're caught up, like I could see where you're at, where they say, okay, you could be at this position in a few years. I think that would definitely distract me from anything like small. Like even if there were just a lot of small things, I would be like, okay, that's fine. Like that's fine, that's fine. So I guess for me, I would just like make sure to just kind of like watch out and see if there's any like warning signs early on. That way, I can just kind of move on and maybe find something where I won't be put in, I guess, uncomfortable situations. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Thanks for saying that, man. Because I mean, like what you were saying, and what I was kind of asking too, is it goes both ways. It's not just being interviewed and not knowing, but there's also like there's a select few out there like you and Jess that are really good. You know, like good teammates and good providers in a company. Like you don't come across people like you guys very often, and so the interview process is kind of tough because you only get a short amount of them, and you don't want to necessarily bring on someone that will bring the attitude of Cardulu, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks for saying that. Hey Jess, how you doing?
Doing good. Just been kind of listening to what you guys talking about, and it's kind of funny because right now I'm not working, whereas before I've been working for like the last, 5 or 6 years in one job, and so now my wife is she's the one working right now, and reading this one is kind of interesting because I see a lot of what happened with this, with what my wife is going through. Because initially, the small backstory is, through a kind of a rough pregnancy, my wife ended up going to this clinic that treated her and, got her better. My wife was like, this is what I want to do, and it was a great story, almost one that you'd like, turning, trials into, blessings kind of thing in church. And then, like, as she started working for this, you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, because my kids are watching Netflix. Sometimes it eats up the bandwidth. So, but it, bit by bit, like she started seeing like the uglier side of things. Kind of like how I was talking about, like after the first 6 months, she started kind of really seeing what it was going to be like to work there. So it's kind of interesting for me to read this, just because like I'm kind of an outside observer on what's going on with my wife, but it's just really interesting to kind of see what he talks about, kind of some of the, I guess you could call them like warning signs about what kind of leading up to more serious things. But I don't really have much insight into it because I'm not the one in that situation, but it's really interesting to read this one and kind of see what was going on. And it talked about like in my wife, we have a fair amount of, just kind of unpacking the day kind of conversations, and where they talked about in the paragraph at the beginning, Cardullo started to seem distant, critical, intervened frequently in marketing decisions, sometimes undermining or reversing trans decisions. And I was just like, oh man, I can think of exact examples of my wife telling me, like, getting undermined like in front of other employees, and like basically undoing work, or asking her to do things, but then or not asking her to do things, but expecting her to have them done. It's just like, oh, it's scary. Like, I don't know. So this is kind of interesting to read for me.
Dang. That's a interesting situation because I'm sure you're going to school and going to apply it after, right? And so, you'll be learning and using this experience of your wives to be able to situate yourself later on too.
Yeah, it definitely kind of gives you. I mean, it's obviously always harder when you're in the situation to kind of see it initially, but I mean, and I've tried to just be supportive, like, yeah, you can do it. I don't want to be like telling her what to do, and like, oh, this is terrible, we need to like find a new job. She loves it. The work that she does, it's just the people she works with. She's just like, gritting her teeth constantly. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to watch from the outside in.
funny. But I see that too with me because both my wife and I are both working full time, and so we both like do the what's it called, venting sessions sometime. But it's hard because you don't want to bring it home.
Yeah.
And let alone sometimes the other or one of the spouses like me or her, you don't really care, you know. You're like, well, that kind of sucks, but you want to care to share your love and support. So it's kind of funny.
It's a tough balance, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I'll tell you. Hey, speaking of Kevin, did you get engaged at all?
No,
Okay.
no, not yet. I kind of want to get like through school, finish up, and then do that. But
I just wasn't sure because we went a whole semester and I didn't hear anything. So, so, I guess kind of the background. We didn't really talk about this because we kind of just started discussing, which was awesome. I like that. More so. Hey, Derek, how you doing?
Good. You? Sorry.
No, you're good. Hey, we were just talking about like personal experiences with work and roles and responsibilities, a little bit about interviewing or even being interviewed. And we're about to dive into the case. So just in time, my friend.
Okay. Sounds good.
A little bit of background with Turner case. So Kevin, Jess, and I were stating how he kind of went into this and got interviewed. In an interview process, it's tough to be able to situate yourself to understand anybody in a company, especially the one being interviewing you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And an interesting part was that Cardulu told Turner, hey, you can't meet anyone because they're all super busy with finances right now. And it's like, yeah, and in any experience, somebody might be so busy, but if somebody's nice enough, they're gonna say, hey, what's up, man? Nice face. You know, nice to see you. I'll catch up with you next week or something like that.
Yeah.
But, continuing on, the Turner had a hard experience where he felt that he had all these opportunities, and later on he found that Cardulu was a lot more micromanaging and more into the decision making than he was going to be. And this all led to the point of where I think the name is Chin. Cardulu's boss is going to come in and situate the whole problem or situation and circumstance. Is there anything in that overview that anyone wants to add or bring up before we go through questions?
sounds good to me.
Alright, cool. So, one of the first ones, Kevin and I kind of talked a little bit about this, about how did Turner get himself into this predicament and what is going on for Cardulu. So, Derek, have you ever been in a situation where you're like, you weren't iffy about the job or being interviewed, but you were questionable, that you wanted more questions answered?
Oh yeah. So, well, maybe something's going on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So, I used to work on a dairy farm and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, your family requires some changes that I didn't want to make, and so I started looking and found this job, and that I'm at now. I don't necessarily love it. I put up with it, and so I made the change. Anyways, I really wish I could be back dairy farming, but I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. And it has kind of the same setup as Turner, the boss, is kind of a power freak, and I got interviewed, and it sounded pretty good, like it was gonna be an all right place, and it is, but there's a lot of things that he sugarcoated or didn't say that I thought should have been brought up in the interview. And anyways, it just, it is what it is. And I think that we just live and learn. And now that was mainly the reason I decided to come back to school and finish 4 years, was because of this job that I'm at now, hoping to find something better.
That's cool.
Anyways.
Thank you, Derek. I actually was telling Kevin and Jess about a situation kind of like that, and you brought a good question in my mind, like why, and this is for everyone, including me, but why do you think that interviewers or owners or different people like that put that sugar coat on during those bringing on the job? Like,
well, I mean, I mean, obviously, like they want to make it seem appealing, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think they necessarily do it consciously. I remember talking about ethics in auditing, and bias is, even when, like, they did studies, like even when you're going to be biased, like there's almost no reduction in bias. So I mean, when you're interviewing somebody and trying to make it seem like they want this job, I mean, I would imagine you're going to want to be like, yeah, you're going to be have all this autonomy, you're going to be able to do this and that, and it's just a great environment. And I mean, it's kind of a deception. Like, sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious, and to whatever degree will vary, I think, by the interviewer, depending on them. But that's what I think.
That's cool. That actually brought up an idea for me, is that a lot of times that I've noticed that is that the person interviewing at their company is in high need of somebody. If they're hiring somebody, that they definitely need somebody almost ASAP, and that goes daily with everyone. And so to prevent that, I don't know, like that'd be a whole nother case of itself, trying to find out how to prevent last minute needs like that.
It's kind of funny though. This guy that I interviewed with, he's just a little bipolar, and I must have hit him on one of his good days. And
oh, geez.
Anyway, so it was different for sure. I mean, you talk to him, he said, "Oh, it's the best place in the world. You'll move right up, get all this stuff that you get," and then you talk to him on one of his down days, and it's just a totally different company. It just is interesting. But
yeah, actually, when I was living in Rexburg, my girlfriend, she was applying for Progression. It's like a call center. And they would sugarcoat it and be like, "Oh, we do all this cool stuff." And they try to make it fun, because obviously a call center is not a fun job. And so they really definitely make it seem
definitely
like,
not.
This is so cool. We do giveaways. We have like parties. We do all this stuff. And I was like, and when she was telling me about it, I was like, this just like, I was like, it's a call center. There's no way it's like this fun. Like, it's probably going to be pretty boring. And she's like, no, it'll be fun. And like a week into it, she's like hated it. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of funny reading this case study, and I just remembered that. And I definitely think with places that are, and it's probably different with bigger companies, obviously, but like places like call centers, they're going to hype up what the job experience is like, because if they go in saying you're just going to be on the phone all day, nobody's going to want to work for them.
Yeah. That's funny. I totally know what you're talking about with those call centers.
Wouldn't that be hard to be energetic and excited about a call center?
Yeah, definitely.
Being denied on the phone all day long.
Yeah. I mean, how do you tell somebody, look, this is the best thing in the world. You're going to love it. I mean, how can you honestly tell somebody that about a call center? Anyways.
Sales personalities, man.
Yeah. You can sell somebody on how cool a call center is, then you're pretty good at selling.
Yeah.
So the things we've been talking about are like what these individuals, like for instance, this call center, what we initially bring to the table, or the first impression, I guess. I think that's a good way to say it. Like, first impressions are always awesome. They always want to make it great, right? But the second question talks about what Cardullo and Turner, what they initially brought to the table, or what they thought success as their first impression. In my mind, I think Turner kind of ensured the success for the opportunities. He totally was like, what, president or the higher position in 2 years? Like, he's like, I can do this, have fun, and totally do that in 2 years and then be set. I would be thinking that, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's kind of funny that it almost makes you like, this is the second job I've had somebody say, if you stick around long enough, you'll run the place. And, you know, some people think that that's great. Me, I don't want that responsibility. The pay would be nice, but you can't pay me enough to really put up with it. I mean, it's just interesting that, I mean, yeah, those promises are there, and it's probably true in some senses, but I mean, there's a lot of time and input that and learning in order to do that. And I don't know. I just think that that's just a way for people to try and keep you there.
Yeah, spice it up.
Yeah. Just think that you're going to be in charge and be able to do everything that you want after so many years. But I have a hard time when people say that, because how true is it really? You know?
And that's a good point, because a lot of the times the person doing the interview process is in that higher management position, and they expect or see it as like the best thing for them. So it should be good for everyone because it's getting paid so much. And hey, this is great benefits. And, hey, you can be the decision maker. It's a great point, Derek, that when performing interviews or when participating with just work in general, that not everyone's the same. They bring different talents and desires to the company.
Yep.
That's a good point. What do you guys think Cardullo initially brought?
I mean, I feel like the original Cardullo, he was like kind of almost misleading in a lot of ways, because he was kind of, he's this outgoing guy. He kind of seemed like he'd be a mentor and kind of get Turner prepped for the position. And I think he kind of almost turned and became this bitter guy who, I don't know, just kind of has a temper and everything. I don't know. It just kind of seems like they're two different people. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Trying to find. So on page 3, second paragraph from the bottom, it says Cardullo had also expressed strong opinions about how to run a business. He believed firmly in management by objectives and stressed the importance of good communication among the top executive team. At the same time, he thought each manager should run his or her own area with minimal help from other functions. So I actually didn't catch that last part the first time, that like you're saying, hey, I don't need that much help in these departments. So like that would be a red flag to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a teamwork, And in his first expression about how to run a business, he's like giving his opinions how to run a business. Well, when somebody's saying that, you know they're not going to give you the reins. It's like if somebody's telling me how to do it, they're just still going to come in and tell me how to do it, even when I'm doing it their way. So I think that answers the second part of the question to me about how Cardullo initially brought on the future failure that could be approachable.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at this, and something I've learned recently with just relationships, period, is, and I think we talked about this kind of in a future case, is like expectations and communicating them clearly. Like, obviously, there was expectations on both sides with, Cardullo, but he didn't convey them in a way that, in his interview, how he presented the position was definitely not indicative of what he was really looking for. And it's the same thing with interactions with family, and you just gotta kind of get as much as possible, get expectations out of the way, and just like try and communicate and find out what the real situation is, which is hard when it seems like Cardullo was trying to kind of hide it, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's like what I don't know if you were on here when Kevin was saying that, or if it was you that said about the two personality. That'd be tough, like initially being the good guy, and then later being a prick about everything and still trying to be the good guy. That'd be so tough. Like what Derek was saying, it'd be something you couldn't pay me enough to wear two personalities. So, third question, what were the key choice points where either of them could have done things differently? So key choices that could have been done or handled differently. I think that Turner could have made the interview process a lot more longer, or like lined out to apply stuff, rather than saying okay, and like rather than just talking, actually getting involved, because that's something that's helped me with situations, is actually involving myself with the situation to be able to figure out the problem. It's kind of like at work. So I do a lot of construction management, and there's big issues sometimes with startups or shutdowns or temporary systems, and you don't actually know the issue until you start getting involved and like daily reviewing it. And that I guess that's a principle for anything, Even with teaching or learning, education doesn't come overnight, or being the smartest or strongest guy or strong working out doesn't come overnight. So that's what I would have done if I were Turner. I would have involved myself more in the interview process by involving myself in the company. And some companies don't let you do that. I understand that, but
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jesse. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of on that point, like it's almost like kind of Turner heard what he wanted to hear and just like sweet, and didn't think anything else about it. Like, I mean, like like I mentioned, when Cardullo was just kind of sugarcoating it for him, that alone should have put up some red flags for him. And where it sounds like this position was going to be fairly involved and require a lot of work. Like, it almost seems like Turner should have done more homework. I mean, it's easy to say that, but just looking at the situation from the outside, like, given the position he was being offered, the kind of the opportunities, it's like I would think there should have been a lot more like kind of like you said, almost like a hands-on, you know. And again, the red flag should have been, oh, you know, the sales force is too busy. It's like pretty sure most states have like legal, you know, mandated break times where you could talk to people, but you know, that's kind of see the deception going on, you know, from Cardulo. So I mean, it kind of seems like Turner was being a little blissfully ignorant, just because of the opportunity he saw.
Yeah.
I definitely
I agree with that. I think it could have gone different. Turner could have done something different, and Cardello could have been a little more honest. I mean, Turner could have certainly researched more and done better at looking into the company, but I'd have a hard time trusting Cardulo now because, I mean, since he sugarcoated it, my thought is he really going to be honest with me with his expectations or with his job description? Since now that I have the job, I mean, that anytime he tells me to do something or we have a conversation, it would make me think, well, is he really just trying to make it sound good, or is he really?
Yeah, like what is he really after?
Right.
And is that president spot open? The one that he promised him, you know, in the interview or kind of hinted at? Is that just completely false to kind of keep him around? And if I were Turner, I would have tried to almost kind of come to understand Cardolo more during the interview, because I think if you can kind of understand a little bit more about the person who's interviewing you, then you might be able to get a better understanding of the company that you're about to work for.
Yep.
That's cool, yeah. So, a word that has been used a few times is like expectations. And a few years ago, I learned something about myself that I grew up and lived my life according to expectations. You know, like I always sought to live up to them. I wanted to be a person pleaser, I guess you could say. Now being older and understanding that, I wanted to fully grasp and please and live up to the expectation that somebody else needed of me, like my dad, or my mom, my siblings, my school teacher. Like, hey, they expected me to get an A, so I'm going to get an A because that's what makes them happy, and I don't want them to be mad at me. So that's an interesting point that you guys were saying about Cartulu. Like, what are the expectations? And if I were Turner, like, I don't know, if I was in that situation 3-4 years ago, I would have been seeking to fulfill the expectations, and I would have just been going on a roller coaster with this Cartulu guy because the expectation wouldn't have been known or it would have been changed on a weekly basis, and I would have got super frustrated and worn out. And so it's just a good point in a case that yeah, you need to fulfill expectations, but focus more upon the responsibilities and the foundation thereof, which I think Turner could have chose that differently rather than asking at the end of the case, hey, like, I don't remember what page it was. It was like page 7 probably or 8. Turner was like, I need to sit down and figure out my responsibilities with Cardulo again. And that would have been something before I even got on the job. Like, I know he did a little bit, but he should have really set in stone those and reminded Cardulo of those and his character within those responsibilities for the company. That really would have helped both sides.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that because, you know, like I mentioned, kind of, you know, when we were just kind of talking about, you know, the case in general, that's one of the things that, you know, I see my wife, you know, she comes and talks to me about, you know, struggling with her job is she, like, you know, she's hired for one thing, and then she's telling me all the time that, you know, she ends up doing all these other things that are not, you know, specifically part of her job description, and and she's frustrated because she doesn't have, there's no like official job title, which means like she can't have quote unquote official set in stone duties. And so it's an interesting point to make sure that when you're in a situation where, well, in any situation really within some sort of organization, that what your roles are. It kind of makes me think of why in the scriptures it talks about these are the duties of the deacons, the priests, the teachers, the elders. It's like, I mean, obviously to a point there, there's some wiggle room in there, that elders can do what teachers do, et cetera. But the Lord has a house of order, and He talks about establishing a house of order in our own homes and in the church. And it makes sense why you'd want to have clear roles defined, because without that, you start getting kind of chaos, people running amok and just doing whatever. And I'll just take that on, and then somebody else tries to take it on. You're doing either double work, or no one's doing something that they need to. And it's a big source of frustration. I can see with my wife. I try and calm her down and help her, because obviously I can't solve her problems, but it's interesting to see the effect it can have, just like in this case, when people didn't have clear defined roles, didn't know what their roles were, or how to approach them. It's very frustrating to everybody involved, because my wife tells me all about how her boss gets frustrated with her, and she gets frustrated with their boss, but neither one really knows what they expect of each other. I think is the big hang up. So it can cause a lot of frustration, and end up with I think where did it talk about, there's like a meeting where Cardullo, they were talking about like the cash flow problem, and Cardullo went into this meeting and was like, no, we're good. And I remember like Turner just kind of, he says, Cardullo pointedly emphasized the company's strong cash position at the next management committee meeting, which struck Turner as a subtle rebuke. Like, you start looking at everything kind of with a grain of salt, when you get to that point where everything just kind of feels like they're kind of just getting to you on purpose, when you don't really know what's supposed to be happening. And so people feel like, both sides end up feeling like the other person isn't doing what they're supposed to. And that leads to a lot of, I don't want to say pent up anger, but not being able to voice constructively what needs to be said, and what, to accomplish things that need to get done.
Yeah, like you said, it takes a voice to speak up, and even if one's not speaking up, it's tough to be that one to speak up. But in the long haul, that's what it takes, and that's what's needed. So it benefits. And I'm sure you guys have seen, either from missions or relationships with spouses or siblings or anything, that if there's a situation that isn't panning out, maybe there's contention in the home, or there's like those frustrations we've been talking about. If you don't bring it up and talk about it like in an appropriate and kind way, and figure it out together, then it's never going to get solved, and it'll only get worse. And that's the advocate's plan, man. I mean, we learned all about that at General Conference this week.
Yep, and I think people hold grudges too long, and they just need to talk things out, figure it out, and get over it, and grow up.
Yes,
And I think that in this situation again, you just got a power hungry person who wants to have the last say. He just needs to humble himself a little bit and realize that he doesn't know everything, and that other people have good inputs. But
that's so cool. I liked what you said, because that's That's a big part of what makes an effective team. And in this course, that book we're reading about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, if we would all apply what Derek was just talking about, of not being the last to say, or the approval, or hey, this is my big idea, like in anything we do, that goes so far in the world, man. That's a cool point. Thanks, Derek.
Yep.
All right, last question. How, if at all, should Turner approach Cardullo at the end of the case? And this was my hardest one because it's basically what we've been talking about. Like, dude, I know he's been trying to talk to him and try to take him out to lunch, but I would stop beating around the bush and just be straight with him. And I have done that before in my experiences, and it's the best route you could take that I've experienced. I'm sure there's better ways, but that's the best I've experienced.
Right. I mean, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to really want to talk about it, but you got to do it and just get it over with and move on, because you're wasting time at work and doing everything else. I mean, he's losing production. Turner is, and so is Cardullo, because they're getting mad at each other. Just get over it, talk it through, and just try and figure out a solution to it. I mean, it's not production loss. You're wasting a bunch of money on you and him being mad at each other. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, remember that one part in the case where he got that email, took it to the lady, crumbled it up in front of her? He's like, what the heck? You never heard of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he talked to him before, and it went well. So I feel like if he it went pretty well. I don't know. I can't remember if he, after a while, it felt like Cardullo was going back on what they originally, the concerns that Turner brought up with him. But I think, obviously Turner doesn't he shouldn't just get mad at him. But I feel like if they just have an adult conversation about it, and Turner just asks what are your expectations from me? What exactly do you want from me? Because sometimes, I'll do something and that you ask me to do, but it's not right. And so I think it kind of goes back to the expectations thing that we talked about, where it's you kind of got to he needs to define what Turner should be doing.
Yeah, and his role in all of the scheme of things.
Yeah.
So I know most of us have either worked before in a good position with your intern, high job career, are currently working, or will be working. But from this case, how do you feel that you personally are going to make those points or the differences as Turner, as we've discussed, before you take a job?
I think just kind of what I see from this case, and kind of like we talked about at the start, is try and see as much of a company as possible. Kind of move past the sugar-coated stuff. Because just reading, his interactions with people, and obviously Turner turned pretty sour near the end as well. In terms of how he was dealing with people, and it's understandable, but those are still his choices. But I think the biggest thing is to really get as good a feel as possible for a company as you can. When you're working for McDonald's, it's you really know what you're going to get. But where there's a complex company like this, where there's sales, there's marketing, there's accounting, there's management. There's a lot of departments that try and coordinate as much as they'll let you, and I think that would be another key thing in that process is how open are they with that information. Obviously there's there might be some trade secret issues, if they don't want you to see things before you're an employee. But if they don't, want to let you explore as much as possible, like, that should be a big red flag for some, for me, that would be a big red flag, if I was considering making a pretty serious, job commitment.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually talking to my sister. She does medical sales, and she was interviewing with the company that she now works for, and they do like ride-alongs. I mean, the interview process is 2 or 3 weeks. She's got to fly, to the East Coast, and then she's got to do ride-alongs with different employees and kind of see the territory and like what she would be doing, what her role would be doing, like what her role would be, and everything is pretty much defined for her before she even begins. And so that's kind of how I would want to be when I went into a job. Like I wouldn't want to start a job and just be completely lost, and I would kind of want to know people too before I go in. So that's kind of my takeaway from it is just, get to know the business before you even begin.
Yeah, it's just like that scripture, who buildeth a tower before they sit down and plan it.
Mm-hmm.
And make like being sure that he can even build the tower. Like that's a good point, Kevin. Am I fit for the roles and responsibilities? Do I even have this talent to perform? Like,
Yeah,
I was telling my wife because she was recently like updating her resume for her internship thing, and it's so crazy what resumes do. They just like suck you up and sweeten you up so much to where people actually want to look at you because the interview process is so quick usually. Not like your sister had an awesome opportunity with the 3-week thing, but usually like that's not the case, right? So, shoot, where was I going with this? But I don't know. I think that's super cool that your sister got to do that, and I would want to do that too, of a long application, be able to show my actual responsibility or my talents performance rather than people judging my resume and being like, yeah, I don't really think he's got that skill, or hey, I think he's got that skill and I really don't,
yeah, and she actually interviewed with another company, and they basically were like, yeah, like you have the position, and they had her do all of this stuff, and then they're like, oh, never mind, like we're on a hiring freeze now, and she was all like, she was all upset, and I was like, I think that you may have actually just caught a break on that one, because that's kind of telling.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting, if you're wanting somebody to come work for you, and you interview them and they're excited about the job. Like I was able to tour. I called them and I could have went in any time that the supervisor was available, and he would have told me, what we were doing, what we, just like that 3-week tour, or what Kevin's sister had, and with Cardello not just tidying things up, that would not being very open, that would definitely make it hard for me to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because in fact, there was, when I was up at BYU Idaho, there was an ag teacher that he said, I came and toured the place 3 or 4 times with somebody, and they told me my job description, they told me where I was going to be. Before I accepted the job, he said they were pretty open and pretty honest with me. Of course, it's BYU Idaho, but that's something big. That if a company's open, they really want you, they're gonna make some adjustments and let you come and look and see what's going on.
So, in my other group, there's a guy that works for the church. He does all the paperwork. Like he's in charge of all the Book of Mormons being printed and signed, everything that has to do with paper in the church. He's like one of the main guys for the USA. I was like, what? That's cool. So I told him, hey, keep an eye out for me if I ask for an opportunity, man. Because to me, it'd be cool to work for the church, So I was asking him some details, and he said, you know what? it's awesome to work with the church because you have gospel standards and people that have same situations with their standards and morals. But he's like, it's still a company. You still have your people in it. You still have situations that are tough to fight against. And I was like, wow, that's interesting that it's the people. It's like it's not necessarily the company, it's the people. And that's kind of like with Christ Church. Yeah, it is completely about Christ and his gospel, but the people make that be the light on the hill, with Christ. We are his disciples, and it's up to us to be that disciple. So that's a cool point, Derek. Cool, guys. Any other comments before we close out this last case? I think it's the last one. I don't think we have one next week.
I kind of hope, not that I haven't enjoyed listening and joining in on these case studies, but I'm glad they're over.
Yeah. It's nice to have another semester under the belt for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. It looks like the Accountability Project and a 360. I don't know what that one is. But if you guys have any questions or any needs from here on out, give me a holler.
Sounds good.
And thanks for
Okay,
your guys.
thanks.
It's a great case.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. See ya.
Have a good night.
Good night.